This morning, I want to preach a message that is so important, and yet we forget about it because we allow life to get in the way so often. I allow life to get in the way. Sometimes my wife tells me something and life gets in the way, and then time comes for that thing that we agreed upon, that I did agree upon, and then the time is there and she goes, "Hey, tonight's that thing." I'm like, "What thing? What thing?" And that's on me because I allowed life to happen. Well, sometimes in our spiritual growth, life happens too, and we forget so many important things. This past week, I've seen an old memory pop up a couple of times, and I used to think it was funny, but the humor is quickly being sucked out of this the older I get. What I saw was a meme that says, "Do you remember the commercial with the lady that says, 'I've fallen and I can't get up'?" That's becoming less and less funny the older I get. I saw that meme and I'm reading that, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's not a lot of humor there. I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny. It's humor, it's funny without humor, if that can be a thing, but that's how it hit me. Life seems to be unfair. I'm looking at life this week and I'm realizing, man, it's really unfair. Have you ever heard the phrase, youth is wasted on the young? When a person's young, they have all the energy, they have all the endurance, they can run circles around the older generation. I mean, we get exhausted watching them use their energy. That's not fair. Like, I need a nap. Why? Because I was watching him use energy. How much energy did you use? None. But it wore me out watching them with their energy. But the youth, they lack wisdom that comes with age because they haven't had enough life experiences. They haven't experienced these things yet. But as a person ages, they grow in wisdom and understanding. What they lose is that endurance and that strength and that energy. Yeah, now I'm understanding life pretty good. Well, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. I have no more energy. Yeah, I know how to do it now. I can teach you. And the young people are like, yeah, they don't know. Oh, they do know. They do know. Take some time and learn from the older generation because they might not have the energy, but sometimes they have the wisdom. And it's good for the older people to connect with the younger generation because what you can't do, they are able to do. And it just seems unfair. If only we could have the wisdom of the aged and the energy of the young. No matter what age we get to, we still seem to have a certain level of dependency. Every age. The reason I wear glasses isn't only because I make them look amazing. There's a time to laugh and there's a time not to laugh. Yeah. An amen would have been appropriate there. The reason I wear glasses isn't because I make them look good. The reason why I wear glasses is because for some reason my eyes decided to stop pulling their weight. And it was one day they were fine, and then the next day I'm like, okay, maybe I'm sick or something, I don't know. And I've been sick ever since. It's not bouncing back. And I don't, why not? It's just eyes. How did I wear them out? All I do is see. I'm not even putting a lot of energy into this. I'm just seeing, and they're wearing out. Even when a person is in their prime, if you're in the prime of life, you realize that you have a lot to learn or that you are losing something you once had. And sometimes people go into what they call a midlife crisis, where I'm getting old and I know I'm getting old, so now I'm going to buy all the young stuff and I'm going to wear all the young stuff and I'm going to defy this age thing. No, you're not. That's not what that is. And people know you're in your midlife crisis. Like, see that guy with the walker and that motorcycle? There might be an issue here. Suddenly, life seems short because it is. Look at this verse in James chapter 4 and verse 14. It says, "For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." Life is short. So why am I choosing to begin this sermon with this depressing news? Like, thanks a lot. We were really excited about coming to church and you sucked the joy right out of that. Why am I choosing to start the sermon out with this depressing news? Because it represents a greater reality that we often overlook. I'm not going to talk about how short life is. That's not the point of the message. But this represents something amazing and we miss it. And sometimes I miss it too. So I need this sermon just as much as anybody else could use this sermon. In the book of Matthew, we have an awkward situation arise. Two of Jesus' disciples, James and John, have their sights set on a pretty lofty goal. They love Jesus, and they see him as God's answer for mankind's problem. They understand this, that you are the Messiah, you're the chosen one, you are the answer to mankind's problem. Neither one of them, they're not desiring to usurp Jesus' authority or anything like that. He's the right man for the job, and they understand that. They just want to lead next to him. They just want to be the guy on the right and the left. You know, like, hey, you're in charge, and hold on. I want to be there with you. I want to be in that leadership role with you. Apparently, they had been talking about this when they were at home too, because their mother knows about their desires. And this good mom decides to step up and make this known. On their final trip to Jerusalem, before Jesus' crucifixion, this is how close they are to watching this man for the job die. They're on their final trip to Jerusalem before the crucifixion, and James and John's mother decides to fill out the comment card and put it in the box. I'm going to go ahead and throw this one in. Look at Matthew chapter 20 and verse 20. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" And she said to him, "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your kingdom." By the way, she just asked this question in front of all the other disciples. They're all right there. You know those times as a parent when your kid comes to you and asks you if their friends can come over for dinner, and their friend is standing right there, and then you look up and their parents are standing right there, and the kid says, "Can they come over for dinner?" And you look up and everybody's just waiting for your answer. Clearly it's okay with his parents because they haven't said a thing. Like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't do that." No, they're just silent. And right at that moment, all the pressure's on you. You know, that awkward feeling where you know, well, we're going to have a conversation later, just me and my kid. You don't do that. You ask me behind closed doors or something, but don't do that. This is the kind of situation that Jesus has just been brought into. She's asking this in front of all the other disciples. Now all eyes are on Jesus, and everybody's waiting to hear how Jesus is going to respond. If Jesus chooses James and John to lead next to him, there are definitely going to be some hurt feelings in the group, especially Peter. Of all people, Peter's like the man all the time, right? So, I mean, James and John say, "Hey, we want to sit on your right and your left hand." Mom steps in and says, "Would you please do this for my boys?" Oh, that tugs on your heartstrings a little bit, right? Mom got involved. Now, everybody's looking at Jesus like, what's he going to say? Feelings are about to get hurt if he says, "Yes, you guys can do that." There's 10 other disciples like, hold on. Jesus decides to answer her question in his typical style. He turns the question back on them. That Jesus is known for this. You ask me a question, I'm just going to go ahead and put that back on you. Now the pressure's off me and it's on you. Look at how he responds. Verse 22. But Jesus answered and said, "You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with?" And they said to him, "We are able." It seems to be a pretty unusual reply here. They just asked Jesus for leadership roles, and Jesus asked them if they were able to drink of the cup or be baptized into his scenario. The cup that Jesus was about to drink from was crucifixion. Okay, so, hey, can we lead? How's crucifixion sound? Like, I feel like we're not on the same page here. He says, "Would you be able to drink of the cup that I'm about to drink out of?" And the baptism he's referring to is his own murder. I'm about to go into this situation, and Jesus is about to be fully immersed into death for them. James and John want to be elevated into leadership positions, and Jesus turns the topic to death. Great conversation. And whether they knew what they were saying or not, James and John agreed that they were able to go into that scenario too. The obvious question here is, why did Jesus bring up death? Why did he bring up his death? Death wasn't what they were asking for. Maybe he missed something. Can we lead with you? You want to die? Who? How did you phrase the question? What went wrong there? Death isn't what these guys are asking for. Being beaten and rejected is not on their wish list. That's not what they're going for here. They never even brought this dark topic up. So why did Jesus bring it up? Why does he bring this up here? He was trying to teach them where true righteous leadership shines. I want you to see, you're asking about leadership, and I'm answering your question on leadership. By asking them this question about death, he was informing them about their own future as well. Look at verse 23. So he said to them, "You will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father." Both James and John would eventually be extremely persecuted for taking a stand for Christ. It was coming. They just agreed that they would be able to drink from that cup, and Jesus just confirmed it. So they did get confirmation. I mean, they were looking for confirmation. They just got confirmation. It just wasn't for the question they thought they asked. You know, can we lead with you? Hey, we got confirmation. Great. So can we? No, it's something about dying. We got confirmation on that. Regarding that question, the question that they asked, Jesus just told them that those positions were not his to give to them. I can't give you that position. They just asked the greatest person to ever walk the face of the earth for greatness, and he says, I can't give you that. I can't give you that. And in that moment, any greatness that they had just fell through the floors in the eyes of the other 10 disciples. Like, man, we thought you two were, you guys had it down. You guys were doing good. And now suddenly everything just crumbled. Look at verse 24. It says, and when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. James and John turn back towards the other disciples, and they get a huge helping of shame. That's always a good feeling. Like, oh, God, look what we did. Look what we did. How arrogant. How arrogant. They wanted to rule. They wanted to be elevated to greatness. The only thing they got in that moment was to be looked down upon. That's all they won in that scenario. Every other disciple interpreted that situation as these two wanting to be in authority over them too. Because if you get these positions, guess where we are? Okay? So you want to be in authority over us too. The Jews lived under Roman authority, and they wanted to get out from under Roman authority. And now two of their friends seem to want to step into that position. So they're judging and shaming them. So Jesus decides to gather everybody together to help clarify why he can't give them their request. This goes deeper. And he's also going to help calm down these other disciples in this conversation he's about to have with them. So look at Matthew 20 and verse 25. But Jesus called them to himself and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. This is the problem. 10 out of the 12 disciples think that this is what James and John, this is their mindset. You want this, which means you'll be Lord over us. That's the problem. And Jesus just agreed that this kind of thing does happen. When people hold positions of greatness, sometimes they lord it over other people. We have that happening in our own country. You may have that happening in the place you work. This kind of stuff happens all the time. The key problem falls in the words over them. Okay? Lord it over them. Exercise authority over them. They see themselves as greater. That's how authority, a lot of times they see themselves as greater. They view their status as more valuable than yours. If there's a concern of whether things should go your way or theirs, you can rest assured it will be theirs, because that's how lording over works. Jesus is pointing out the fact that this is how the Gentile rulers operate. This is how they operate. But this isn't how the kingdom of heaven works. This is not how God's kingdom operates. All 12 of his disciples need to understand how true righteous leadership shines. They need to know this. So he's clarifying this for them. Look at verse 26. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. Like, do what? He misunderstood. We were asking about leadership. Yes. How do I become great? You need to be the servant. Something's not computing. We are not communicating, Jesus. And Jesus is like, we are really communicating now. We are really opening this thing up. This probably just threw all 12 disciples for a loop. Like, okay, I don't know if it was James or John that's speaking to him, but the mom, they'd probably go to their mom and like, how did you phrase the question? Did you ask him if we could be in leadership roles? Yes, I did. He's talking about death and servanthood. What did you say, Mom? How did you phrase it? I feel like we're on different pages here. So Jesus is saying, I'm letting you know how this works. The servant is the greatest. They never heard this reasoning before. Because even in today's culture, even in our culture today, that's not how that works. The servant can't be the greatest since the servant is the one who serves the other. So it doesn't make sense. The servant isn't in the highest position, he's in the lowest position. His status isn't greatness. His value isn't even worth discussing. What's Jesus talking about? Everything he just said sounds backwards, even in our ears. If we're talking about, if you were to have this conversation with your boss, he says, this is how it works. You want to be great, you can be the janitor. Like, hold on, no, you don't understand what I'm going for a promotion. You get to be janitor. Like, it doesn't make sense even in our ears. And there's another problem here too. Now, this one's a little bit shady here. Jesus is the greatest. This all sounds ideal for the one who reigns above everyone else. Good answer, Jesus. Hey, I want to be great, then you can be servant. That sounds good for the guy who's in your position. That works out great. It's great. It's a great rule if you live above it. That's a great thing. Yeah, that's not looking good on you, Jesus. So that's when Jesus shows them his heart and his sincerity. Look at this next verse 27. And whoever desires to be the first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. The greatest came to be the servant. Oh man, Jesus isn't telling us how the rule works for us. He's telling us how the rule works. Even him, the greatest, didn't come to be served, but to serve. He came to take the lowest position in order to help us. That's huge. That's life-changing. That's the greatness he was trying to teach the disciples that day. It's not about how right you are. It's not about how smart you are. It's not about your status at all. Greatness comes with God's character, and it comes with humility. That's where greatness shines. And if God himself would lead by this example, why would we ever think we could find greatness any other way? Any other way. Look at Matthew chapter 10 and verse 24. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. If our master showed greatness by serving others, then we must understand that this is where true greatness lies. It's in serving, not in elevated positions. Greatness isn't found when you're in search for greatness. It's actually found when you're not. That's when it starts clicking. But there's another element to this which is often overlooked. And this is where humility takes center stage. Every person on the planet will always have a certain level of dependency. All of us will. It's just as the young lack wisdom and understanding and the old lack strength and energy. We're all dependent as people. Every one of us. You are too. I am too. We all have dependency. Some have learned to forgive, and others still struggle with it. See, we have dependency somewhere. Like, well, I have learned to forgive. Good. Do you struggle anywhere else? Yeah, there's another area. Dependency. Are you struggling to forgive? Yes, I am. You have dependency. You need help outside of yourself, just like I need help too. We are all dependent. Some of us carry hurt, and we don't know how to put that down. We don't know how to put it down. Some need to feel like they're in control, and others have already learned to yield. Some of us live in fear or anger, and some of us can't get past the things that we did in the past. But all of us carry a level of dependency, all of us. Every person out there is vulnerable in some way. Me too. We're not going to talk about my issues, but I am too. Every one of us. And that is where Jesus says the greatness will show up, right there. Look at Philippians chapter 2 and verse 3. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. So often we get into situations where we try to elevate ourselves or our positions. Most of the time, we don't even realize that we're doing that. I'm not trying to elevate myself or elevate my position. I'm not doing that. Is she right or are you? Well, I am. Do you see it yet? Like you're trying to elevate yourself or your position. We try to convince the other person that we're right? Isn't that the goal in an argument? Or am I missing something? Isn't that the goal in an argument? To persuade the other person that you are the one that's in the right. And by the way, I'm not putting anybody down. That's just how arguments work. That's the nature of an argument. I'm not arguing that you're right, otherwise the argument's over. I'm trying to persuade you that I'm right. Anytime we don't see eye to eye with someone else, the desire is to be the better persuader. That's how that works. But that's the wrong goal. That's the wrong goal. It should never be about who's right. It should be about what it's going to take to make things right again. Should be the goal. By the way, you're going to find yourself in arguments. And the whole time you can argue that you're the better persuader. And by the way, they're doing the same thing. Okay? Both sides were trying to show the other person that we're right. But what if we change the goal of that conversation? Instead of trying to prove who's right, let's try to figure out what it's going to take to make this right again. Because we don't see eye to eye, we're not getting along. What's it going to take to restore us? Not who's going to win the argument. Because there's value not in me being right, but in you as a person, and there's value in me as a person. So maybe the goal should change from who's right to what it's going to take to make this right again. That would be esteeming somebody else better than yourself. And that's what God's talking about. The verses that I'm about to show you are some of the heaviest verses that a person can get hit with. The reason is because every one of us hate the flavor of humble pie. Every single one of us. There's not a single ingredient in humble pie that some of us are craving at times. We hate the flavor. It's bitter and it tastes horrible. But God felt that these verses were important, so he gave them to us whether we like it or not. And by the way, don't try to show God that you're right and he's wrong. You lose. Just go in knowing you lose. He's always right. So if he's going to give it to us, understand we need it, and he gave it to us for a purpose. Look at Romans chapter 12 and verse 16. Be of the same mind towards one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Whoa. Maybe God just doesn't know how right my opinion is. Maybe he just doesn't know that about me yet. No, I think he has a clue. He's telling us that the issue goes deeper than your opinion. It goes so much deeper than your opinion. People have value. Your opinion, anybody ever heard how valuable your opinion is? Anybody, have you ever heard? My opinion plus $1 takes the value of the dollar down to 50 cents. That is how valuable my opinion is. But people have value, and people will always have value. But sometimes we miss this because we feel that our opinion carries the value. In the middle of an argument, our opinion seems to carry the weight. That's not the goal. It's that person that you love so much that you're not getting along with right now. It's time to change the question. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about what it's going to take to make this right. We are something together. Our relationship is something together. Restoration is what we're looking for. Issues can be important. They absolutely can, but they are never important enough to make another person feel degraded. And by the way, this is something I have to work on too in my life. You get me on a day where I'm really, really tired and really, really sick, just keep walking, because I might not behave myself. Not that I want to treat anybody bad, but I'm just not feeling it right now. We've all been there. We all have to work on this kind of stuff. We're supposed to be the servant. We're supposed to be lifting people up, not tearing people down. That's what Christ designed us for. That new creation is made for this. Again, it's not about who's right. It's about what it's going to take to make things right again. And sometimes it requires us to take a bite of that humble pie, even when you know you're right. Like, I know I'm right about this. He just won't listen. But I know I'm right. Well, is that the hill you want to die on? I do, but it wouldn't be right. Then what about the value of the person? I know. Just really want them to know I'm right. Okay. Take a bite of the pie. Go ahead. Take a bite of the pie, and let's move forward. Maybe we need to apologize for things we said or things we've been holding on to. Solomon learned this, and he sent the message down the line to us also. You know how I know he did it? Because I have it right here. I'm looking at it, and I want you to see it too. Look at Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 23. A man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor. Greatness really does come with humility. That's where greatness shows up. The servant truly is the greatest in the kingdom. When we insist on being the greatest, we end up being brought low. The humble retain the honor. We get a limited number of years in this life, and we unintentionally waste so much of it on trivial things. Was I right? Did I get what I wanted? Did I win? And in looking for these answers, we lose sight of the value of the person we're fighting with. And by the way, the longer I preach, the more I hate this sermon. I just want to let you know, because I'm feeling it too. Things are going through my mind, and I'm just dismissing them quickly. Like, man, somebody else finish this, please, because I'm starting to preach to myself, and I'm feeling it right now. We start losing the value of the person that we're fighting with. And on that note, sometimes we are in the right, and the other person did do us wrong. And that's when Jesus drops this one in our lap. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 32. And be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. Well, how did God forgive you? Was there a time limit on that, or did he forgive you and say, I'm going to give you 93% of forgiveness. Now I'm going to hold on to 7%. That way in the future, I can point to my 7% and remind you about what I already forgave you so much of. And I see some of you smiling because you know there's a percentage that maybe you're holding on to. in some issue that's sitting in your life. Forgiveness isn't saying, don't worry about it, it's okay, because sin is never okay. Don't lie to them, like, hey, I'm sorry, it's okay. Don't lie to them, it wasn't okay. If it was okay, you wouldn't have been upset about it. It's not saying it's okay. That is not what forgiveness is, because sin is never okay. Forgiveness is disconnecting yourself from the event. It's determining that you will not be held down by it anymore. And you are freeing the other person to not be held down by it also. That happened. Let's not go back there. I release you from any debt I feel you owe me. And I'm not going to be connected to the event any longer myself. It doesn't make the action right. It just shows the same forgiveness that God showed you. Forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. And again, humility takes center stage. And you know what happens in that moment? You rise to greatness by serving. Servanthood is the most honorable position in the family of God. Whether you're serving those at home, serving in a position in the church, or just serving others through love from day to day, you are taking the greatest role there is. And by the way, there's a lot of things in our church, a lot of things that go on, just physical things that we could be doing as a body of Christ where somebody's carrying a lot themselves and somebody else could step in and say, hey, let me take a little bit of that load. You're not going to get paid for it. Let me just throw that out there. It's servanthood. It's servanthood. Let me carry the weight with you. That's greatness. Let me release you from any debt that I feel you have. Man, you owe me something. You know the times when somebody says, I can't forgive them. Why? They haven't apologized yet. Okay, so they owe you something in order to receive that. That's not forgiveness. It's releasing them from the debt altogether. The body of Christ is supposed to be made up of those who serve. That's what God created us for. And we're all struggling with something. I don't care if you're old, if you're young, whether you have the energy or you have the wisdom, it doesn't really matter. All of us are struggling with something in life. All of us are. Hurting people hurt people. If someone's hurting you, it's because they're dealing with something within themselves. Because somebody that is completely satisfied and happy and life is just going really good, they're not going around hurting other people. They're living in bliss. But when somebody's struggling with something themselves, they might lash out at you. Hurting people hurt people. Age doesn't matter. We're all dependent somewhere. Humility helps you recognize this about yourself, and it helps you recognize this about others. And that is what triggers a servant's heart. I see you're hurting me. Now I could get mad at you, or I could be the one to get down on my knees and say, how can I help? How can I help? I know you're mad at me. Is there something I can do to help this situation? Is there something I need to apologize for that maybe I'm overlooking? See, suddenly you're taking the form of a servant in that conversation rather than, well, you did it too. You know, that's a good move. Sometimes we speak more with our fingers than we do our mouth. You know, like, hey, look what you did. Hold on. And we point back and we strike back. We get one life to live for Christ. You get this one. This is your time. Don't waste it. Don't waste it. I was created to be a servant. You were created to be a servant. Greatness comes with humility, not with position. The disciples say, we want greatness, Jesus. Well, let me tell you what that looks like. That's not what we thought you were going to say. That's the facts. Greatness comes with humility. The greatest in the kingdom of God is the one who is serving, not the one that's sitting up here, but the one who came down. Jesus Christ did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. He set the example. Let's live by it.